would like to welcome you all to today's Spotlight, where we're going to focus on a quite interesting and exciting company, Maritime Launch Services. And I've got the pleasure and the honor to have here with me today Stephen Mathieu, the President and CEO of Maritime Launch Services. Stephen, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's great to have you, and I'm sure that there's lots of questions with the audience. So to the audience, I would say, don't hesitate to put your questions forward. You got the Q&A box at the bottom of this call, of this screen, I should probably say, and I'll make sure that your questions will be put forward to Stephen. But Stephen, to kick things off, Maritime Launch Services, can you tell us a little bit more? And I'm thinking here about, people in the audience who don't know your organization yet. Could you tell us a little bit more about your organization? What is the purpose? What is the intention? What is your vision?
Well, thank you, Joss. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the question. So it really boils down to this really significant change in the commercial space industry, where low Earth orbit has been ceded to commercial providers and satellite manufacturers to put satellites into space. It's opened up a huge opportunity for providing launch services to get those satellites into orbit. And this location in Canada serves where most of the people really want to put their satellites into orbit, sun-synchronous polar type orbits, or other inclinations that can be met from Spaceport Nova Scotia is really the fundamental key for us. It's really about our launch service for the satellite clients and that really burgeoning industry.
How big is that market? Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Or tell us a little bit more about that entire, what should I call it, space economy?
Yeah, so the last numbers I saw were in excess of $400 billion a year in everything from build of satellites to launch to deployment to the data stream on the other side, for global broadband, near Earth imaging, all a host of Internet of Things, remote control of vehicles. So it's really a massive market that's growing. It's been growing at 3 to 5% per year. There are estimates of it reaching $1 trillion by 2040 per year. Actually saw an article recently saying it was going to be $1 trillion by 2030 per year. So it's actually really withstood the test of time over the last 10 years or so of it growing, and it is certainly exceeding the expectations.
Yeah, and so setting up a new service, a new launch service out of Nova Scotia. Like, tell me a little bit more about that. Why Nova Scotia, and how to get there? Like, what is the story behind this?
Well, you look to the customers again. What do they want? They want to launch where they want. They want to launch when they want, and they want to launch at an affordable price. And depending on the client, those three can rack and stack differently in their priorities. What we offer here is a commercial launch site. We're not a government range. We're not, Vandenberg or Karoo or other places globally. We're a commercial launch facility in Canada that serves a large range of trajectories where people want to put their satellites. And we can launch as a commercial provider. We can launch, when they want to go, and we will be able to launch at a very competitive price as well.
Yeah, because that of course is immediately the key question that comes to my mind. There's some government facilities out there. There's some other commercial spaceports out there. Like, what makes you unique? What makes you different? Like, how do you position yourself versus competitors, and what do you think is going to make you a winner in this space?
There are really two principal components to that. One, of course, is selecting and using a very seasoned, capable manufacturer of launch vehicles that has heritage, in-place manufacturing capability for delivering 5 tons of satellites to low Earth orbit. That's a very important piece for us. But in fact, I was just on a call right before this one, working with a company that recognize that all these other ranges require huge numbers of employees, the old logic buckets for how they do command and control, and the antiquated systems where they're proposing that they can do everything that's needed for launch. Instead of 100 people, they can do with 8. So there's a whole new day taking advantage of all this miniaturization of technology and the changes in technology to really build the spaceport of the future, if you will. This will be the new model. We're going to break the industry model of going to government ranges. The question is, how can you be a commercial space industry if everybody's using a government range? Shouldn't the commercial facilities also be the launch facilities also be commercial entities?
Yeah. So one of the questions that came in, without rephrasing it exactly with the same figures and the same words in there, but you raise a certain amount of capital. How does that stagger up versus what your needs are going to be to build an entire spaceport? Like how do you see that financing taking place over time? And what do you see as the big needs fundamentally? And we don't have to talk in detailed figures here. We can talk about magnitudes.
Yeah, so it is true. We do have needs to be able to build a full medium class launch capability. So for a small launcher, we essentially have everything we need already. That's part of what we classify as our phase 1 launch, where we can take and do a small launcher suborbitally. There's a number of launch vehicle developers that can basically roll in a trailer, the launch vehicle, roll in another trailer, the payload processing facility. So there isn't a great deal that goes into it to be able to do a small launcher. A medium launcher, yes, requires significantly more financing in order to be able to get that full launch capability in place. But we're on a rolling approach to this. We've been gaining a lot of momentum recently in not just the financing side of things, but also in the work on the launch site itself, the work with a phase 1 launch customer, and moving forward to a phase 1 launch early next year. And it's all about momentum. There's a significant interest in the support from this from multiple governments and a lot of industry partners. We will begin to see launch service agreement contracts in the not too distant future that are also going to be in that pipeline of support to that financing, et cetera, for long lead procurements, et cetera.
So really, what you're saying, it is a step-by-step approach. Phase 1, you are set to enable that, and you have your first call it phase 1 or launch customer is probably the right way to use the word launch twice here, and then you had some big announcements indeed. You talk about momentum. I saw the announcement that you're starting construction. Could you tell us a little bit more about some of the latest developments, like all that momentum that we see rolling out?
Yeah, so we started slow back in 2016 with a kernel of a really great idea where the industry was going to go, and found the right location, and have been working through the processes with the province and the federal government to really move the ball forward to be able to get to a point of building the launch site. So over the last 15 months, and certainly working with a senior exchange in the NEO, and are going public here and listing on April 27th, is a part of that momentum we're building. We've also just recently completed the land lease. So now we've got a 20-year lease for 335 acres with a 20-year option. We got our OTC listing approved as well. And now we've just gotten the approval here in the last 2 weeks from the province to begin construction, and started construction yesterday. Mobile trailers set up, staff out there, environmental safety training conducted. Some of the road work that we had initially started for geotech is getting well underway as we speak.
Yeah, so that is momentum. Yesterday, you put the first spade in the ground, and you are starting to build out the spaceport. That is great news. And then, as you said, you also have some interesting partners already to work with and get things going. Could you tell us a little bit more about the team? Because I know a bit about your background, but I think you guys also build a real solid team together, no?
Yeah, indeed. We've got a really phenomenal board of directors and chairman of the board, Sasha Jacob, Susan MacArthur, Francois Desjardins. We'll probably look to add additional a board member here in the coming quarter. We've got a great advisory board that I hope to be able to share some news about here in the coming days, that are really supportive and understand this advisory board is about helping my team answer some of the questions that are continuing to come forward, working with all the stakeholders that we have in this project. We have a good core team here in Halifax and are growing on it. We've got a US office headed by Robert Farbach, who is a industry expert in space launch previous, and he's president of our US operations and working on the sales and marketing aspects. Harvey Doan is our chief operating officer, decades of experience here in working with Nova Scotia Business Inc. and in the business community. Sarah Mclean came to us through National PR as our communications VP and corporate head. Fantastic addition to the team. Actually, I shouldn't say addition. She started with us with National back in 2017 at our very first open house. Yaroslav Postovyi is our chief technical officer. He's a former state space agency of Ukraine astronaut, trained by NASA, was slated for launch in the 1996, I believe it was, as a second for that. He's moved here from Barrie, Ontario, here about a year ago, and most recently added to Rolf Brandt, who's industry expert in Transport Canada air traffic operations world as well. So a great team we're building and adding more on as we speak.
And that is not mentioning your NASA experience, of course. That says a lot in itself. But a team is what makes a company, and I think that is where you're making also incredible progress, and where you also have momentum. You used the word momentum before. So I see a question here that came in. I'm going to put it forward to you because it's not necessarily totally clear to me. When will government funding be released?
We have not received any government funding for the project. We would love to have government support anytime that they're willing to offer that. Let me couch that by saying we've had really fantastic government support in developing a regulatory framework and working with the Canadian Space Agency, working with ISED, working with Transport Canada, working with Global Affairs, all the stakeholders that are involved in government, a lot of interest from across government. And I believe we've got some things that are coming here in the not too distant future that we'll be able to share about where our government in Canada is relative to rocket launch and space launch that they've been talking about.
Excellent. So this could be a question of someone who has information, or it could be just someone shooting a bit, in the air and hoping that you are going to come with some answer. Stephen, let's maybe move to the next stage. So lots of momentum, as you said, focusing on phase one. That is critical. You're well set from that perspective, with already stakeholders, a solid team, and so on. When I look at your organization and I try to look a little bit further in the future, like what way should I look at your organization? What is your longer term strategy? What are your longer term objectives? And we can maybe talk about what is phase two, phase three, and how do you see all of that developing?
Yeah, so the phase one is the suborbital. Phase two is the medium class orbital launch capability. certainly. And, we've got design teams that are supporting us in that, whether it's specialty support equipment for the systems on the tenant finish, if you will, to the roads and grounds and buildings, power and water, the Stantec, Architect 49. We've got a really replete team here that's helping us build out all that stuff. In the longer term sense, I put my project management 101 hat on and say, don't let scope creep get the better day, but we have been approached by organizations internationally that would like us to replicate a commercial launch facility at their sites internationally. Like I said, first things first. Let's get this one off the ground fully into space, if you will, and then we'll look beyond that. When we selected the ticker MaxQ, there was some meaning behind that. MaxQ for the novice is that maximum dynamic pressure that a vehicle is exerted on a vehicle as it's going into space. And while a vehicle still has to get into space and get somewhere, it's past that point where all the stresses and strains have fallen off somewhat, and you're getting into the environment of zero G and vacuum. That's why we picked MaxQ, is because we felt like it was a threshold working with NEO, Senior Exchange, and going forward to publicly list our company. That was really a key point in our development process, that we have reached our own form of MaxQ, that while we have a lot of work to get there, to get to space, if you will, the dynamic structural pressures are really falling off, with the construction start, the public listing, and the land lease, et cetera, and more things that are coming in the near future.
Yeah. Well, I think that sounds like ambitious plans. I think some of them are clear and straightforward, but I think you're also talking, like, if I would use it in my world, I would probably say that you're looking at some form of white labeling your capabilities across other companies.
Yeah, well, that's indeed right, and it really foundationally comes back to the satellite clients. What their interest and needs are. I would point to that FCC filing deadline last October, where I think it was 8, maybe 9 companies submitted a request for 37,000 additional satellites that they want to put into orbit. That speaks to the volume of it. I mean, there was a European company just 3 weeks ago that announced a constellation that they want to put into orbit in a €3 billion investment plan for remote control of vehicles. So it's almost not a day goes by that there's some new constellation. So the market is clearly there for us, and it's about meeting that market first with what we have here in Nova Scotia with Spaceport Nova Scotia, and then we'll look at where we can go from there.
So a couple of questions from the audience that I would like to take to you. Some are getting a little bit more back probably to the next theme that I want to cover, which is the stock, the security, the listing. But let's maybe take a few other ones first. One question is about customers, MOUs for initial launches or revenue, where they're coming from. I think you already shared a few thoughts about that, but if the question comes up, I maybe would like to ask you to come back to it and give some more details about what do you see ahead of you as tangible customers and revenue opportunities.
So we have a signed agreement that we've been public with respect to NanoRacks and their interest in being a part of our first launch mission scenario with one of their technology demonstrators, and they'll also provide some mission integration support for other components to that first launch. With a 5-ton capability, there is quite a bit that we can get on board there. So that's in the public domain, and that's certainly something we've talked about, year over year since we started our conversations with NanoRacks, and that is certainly moving forward in a positive way. We do have another 11 or 12 letters of intent. Now, intentionally, those are soft. But they are expressions of interest from industry globally. They're protected by non-disclosure agreements. But what is the shift now is we've started construction. So when you can go put a stake in the sand about when you're going to launch, because you actually started construction and you've got a schedule ahead of you that's laying out when your launch days are going to be, then those LOIs start turning into LSAs, launch service agreements, that come with a structure of down payment and payments, months to years ahead of the launch itself, before that launch day happens.
Yeah. That, when I listen to you, Stephen, I hear, an expert in space launches and spaceports, but I also hear a very sound businessman. You got your early adopter locked in, and you have your pipeline that is clearly and well identified. So one other question that I saw that I think is interesting, and will help people to understand a bit more how this business works. So the question is, how many launches are needed to make the company profitable? I would probably put the question slightly differently, so I hope that the person will forgive me who asked the question. But how many launches do you think you need? And there is, of course, the entire mechanism of how payments take place and so on to get to cash flow positive, because that is ultimately the critical milestone for every company.
Well, it's typical that cash flow positive begins about 18 to 24 months ahead of that launch. So if you have a launch, let's say January 1st, 2024, 18 months ahead of that, or 15 months, depending on the negotiation with a particular client, whether it's a multi-launch agreement, et cetera, there's a structure that gets put in place that begins, providing some cash flow into the project, and that certainly is something that can be, escrowed, et cetera, and leveraged for long lead procurements or other aspects of finishing up the site development. At the end of the day, we're only looking to ramp up to a launch tempo of about 8 per year. What we need to basically survive and make and pay the bills for the whole year is 1 launch per year. There's our model fits well that we can maintain operations and be fully viable with 1 launch per year, but certainly we want to increase that tempo. Our production throughput from a logistics perspective, we can get up to about 12 per year, given the in-place capabilities that we have. We don't need that to be viable in any way, but so we're not proposing significant numbers of launches per year. They'll come to us 2 at a time, so we'll ramp up 2, 4, 8 over a 3-year period to get to a nominal launch tempo, and then we'll see where the market demands are.
Yeah. So 1 launch is in fact what would take you to a cash flow positive scenario, because that's what I hear, and then you're probably talking about a couple of them that will take you into profitability.
That's right.
That's impressive. That's very impressive. Stephen, I would like to finish with one last question, because this is a great topic, and we already spent 24 minutes talking, so it shows you always how quickly time goes by. But that is, I'm an investor. We all know how the markets have been doing lately. They've not been very friendly to investors, and there's a lot of macroeconomic elements at play. At the same time, I'm sitting here on cash. Why should I, and neither you or I are here to give any advice to anyone, so there's a small elements to consider, but why should I consider Maritime Launch? Why is that an organization that I should look at today as an opportunity to invest in, or should I be waiting a little bit? What are your thoughts on that, and more from a perspective of what should I all take into consideration?
For Maritime Launch, I would suggest you really look at the momentum that we've been building that is continuing, and we see continuing moving forward. This industry itself has really been rather impermeable to being poked by the markets, and it's growing at a steady clip. The investment in the space sector has been really phenomenal, the largest year ever of 2021, a recent article I read as well. So there is a lot of interest in the sector. There's a lot of need for the service. At the end of the day, there's these satellite clients that their businesses are dependent on them getting them off the ground and into space. And you can't run a business if your satellite is sitting on the ground. And at the end of the day, the need is so great, and the reductions in the market, that contractions in the ability to launch to space, or the government ranges that have their own dedicated missions anyway, there's plenty of market share for us to take advantage of. And when you couple that with Canada's first, never been a launching state before, being able to put Canada on the map from a global insertion of orbits into space, that'll be a first forever. It's a first commercial launch facility in North America, frankly, in the Northern Hemisphere. And to me, it's sort of the direction that I believe the launch commercial space industry needs to go toward.
Yeah. So what you're telling me, or what you're telling, let's call it the audience, potential investors, and everyone, of course, has to do their own homework and do their own analysis. But one, a market that has, continuing and growing demand, no doubts about that. Two, the fact that the solutions out there today cannot absorb that demand. And regardless of what the macroeconomic circumstances are, this business needs to be provided, or this service needs to be provided. And then your organization is coming with a very competitive offering. And I keep in the back of my mind a very important statement that you put forward earlier: one launch makes you cash flow positive. That is all very interesting elements that everyone should be thinking about in a period where we see indeed a lot of volatility in the market, a lot of uncertainty, and here we have an industry that is definitely going to continue to grow and to move forward. Another question that came in, and again, I think you covered it a little bit at the beginning, but again, if the question is asked, I want to make sure that we briefly come back to it. Why is Nova Scotia such an ideal location?
It's so ideal. It's incredible. I did a study looking at 16 different sites around North America, stood on a beach in Chiapas, Mexico, and traveled all over and analyzed locations, and looking at where the market wants to put their satellites, polar sun synchronous orbit and 55-degree inclination. We can serve both of those key inclinations from one spot. The fact that, in layman's terms, the fact that the peninsula of Nova Scotia hangs over the top of the Atlantic Ocean, and we can launch due south with thousands of miles of open ocean and off the coast of Africa at an inclination, those are very desirable to where our satellite clients, most of those 37,000, want to put their satellites into orbit.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty clear answer. I see two questions that remain unanswered. We have 1 minute left, so we're going to try to rapidly cover those also. Are you anticipating a reverse split of the stock in the future?
It's hard to say. At this point, I wouldn't comment on that.
Yeah. I think, by the way, that's a very fair answer. I would personally agree, and I would not comment on it either. And then Nanorex still confirmed?
Yes, they are.
So no concerns from that perspective.
No.
Stephen, I think we did something fascinating. One, you gave a great overview of the company. You gave us visibility in where you're going. You gave us a great feeling about momentum, and you told us that you are in a space, no pun intended, that is interesting for investors going forward. Again, as we said earlier, all do your own homework. The data is out there, so we are not going to recommend you to do anything, but I would recommend one thing though: have a look at this company, because I think that they're on something very interesting. I would like to thank you for your time, for your insights, for your transparency, and for your expertise, Stephen, and also for your willingness to answer all the questions that were put forward by the audience. Sometimes, well, there was one where you pushed back on a little bit, but I would have done the same as you. The reverse split one, I would not have answered that either. But otherwise, thank you for answering all those questions in a very open way. I would also like to thank the audience for joining us, and I hope that this gave you a great introduction to Maritime Launch Services. I'm definitely, on a personal basis and as Neo, looking forward to follow your momentum and reading your news and keeping a keen eye on all the developments that are taking place with this organization. This is unique in Canada. This is a great opportunity for Canada, and I think you guys are doing a hell of a job. Thank you, Stephen, and looking forward to our next catch-up.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.